we're back. So I'm going to turn this off so we can kind of see a little bit better. This is the video where I'm going to show you what the settings have to be for these prefabs. So wall and floor prefabs have to have the same length and width, and it has to be an even length and width. In this case, I've set them to be 5. I've just used scale, but you can model them yourself and leave them at a scale of 1. You just have to know exactly how wide they are in unity units. Otherwise, you can get weird things happening, like things can start to separate a little bit, or you can get wall pieces that are moving and floating. That all looks weird because I still have 2 mazes. There we go. So you want everything to stay together and be seamless. So to that end, it's good to know exactly what your length and width dimensions are. You're also going to want your pivot points centered to the object. So when I click this button here to switch to center view, there shouldn't be any difference. In 3ds Max, I think the button's called Align to Object, and that'll do this for you. You'll also want to make sure that your y-axis is always up. And then a special thing for your wall details is you want to make sure the z-axis is always out. So if you have an actual modeled sconce instead of a cube, you want the z-axis to be out so that your torch isn't facing the wrong way. And it's going to be a little bit harder with things like torches because they don't have a nice cube shape for you to know exactly what the z dimension is. But you're going to have to at least roughly know. Otherwise, your cubes are going to float off the wall or they're going to clip into the wall. If you don't know exactly what your dimensions are, you do always have the option, which I think is kind of cheating. You should just know what the dimensions are. Just kidding. But you always have the option to go into here, to go into your wall details, and then tweak this width until you get it right and the torches are aligned properly. I also recommend when you're setting things like torches, because they're torches, set them all at a uniform height. 2 meters off the ground where torches should be, instead of having them go all over the place. And they should also be centered to the walls, so be kind of uniform. But again, it depends what you're putting up there. If you're putting vines, you want them to be a little more organic, but maybe you want them all to come down from the top. But maybe you want some moss that you want to place, and you want to place it at the bottom. So that's all stuff you can do with this. You can also place different objects throughout the maze, whether they're keys or items or enemies or floating cubes. And I'm looking for some feedback on some of this stuff too. Right now, they're all given a slightly random rotation around the y-axis, and all that's doing is making it so they're not all lined up perfectly. They kind of look more scattered. But there are settings in here for, obviously you saw them for the height from the ground, and for they don't have to be aligned to the specific tile they were generated for. They'll be somewhere in here based on your settings. So that's something that you can play around with, and you can do any sizes. They don't have to be the same dimensions I've put here. You just have to know what they are. You can make a smaller maze with thinner walls if you wanted to, and thinner floor tiles as a consequence. Because the way my algorithm works, I developed it myself without doing what everybody else was doing and what I had researched, which was each cell has 4 walls, and the algorithm breaks down the walls, which is why most of your maze generators generate those thin little walls. I went with a different approach where I have a map of enums that represent tile states, and then those tile states can be, to simplify it, there's a few more states than just this, but floor or wall. A wall will get a wall in it, a floor won't. There's also dead ends and stuff, but you don't really need to know about that unless you want to modify it. And then you can send me an email and I can help you out with that kind of stuff. So because of that, the algorithm works a little differently, and as a consequence, the floors and walls have to have the same uniform dimensions. Like I said, I think I said anyway, you can. Did have it set up so you could make them rectangular, and you could have kind of wonky dimensions, but it looked really, really bad. So I took that out to simplify things. But I'm always looking for feedback, so you can let me know if you want that or not. So next video is going to be a little bit more about saving and loading and some of the tricks to that, because that is the one thing that I wasn't really able to make foolproof, with the exception of entering bad data in this. So there are some specific things you have to keep in mind when you're using the saving and loading feature. So I'll get into that in the next video. In the meantime, if you're tired, go take a break, have a coffee, and then come back.